today we're going to have our speakers speak. We have a great, I think, talk today that I hope you will all find really helpful. And then once they're done, we'll open up the floor to any discussion. And what I'd like to do this week is sort of just do around the table so everybody gets a chance to ask the questions, or if there's no questions, we may ask you some questions. All right, so what I'd like to do now is introduce Colleen Young and Jackie Bender, who will be presenting Using Social Media for Research, Tips, Strategies, and Opportunities. Colleen is the Manager of Social Innovation here at Elixir, and also the founder of Healthcare Social Media Canada, which is an online community of practice exploring social innovation in healthcare. She's delivered award-winning presentations and authored peer-reviewed articles on successful online health communities and strategic community management. Jackie is a research scientist at Elixir and at the Global Center for E-Health Innovation at UHN, and is an assistant professor. That's new, Jackie, good. Oh, congratulations. In the Dalla Lana School of Public Health at the University of Toronto. She's well recognized for her work in health informatics. Jackie's program of research is focusing on informing, designing, and evaluating ways to improve health, wellness, and cancer and healthcare experience of people living with cancer using information and communication technologies. We're very delighted to have you guys both here, so I will pass it over to you now.
Thank you, and I'm really excited to be able to speak with you today from the point of view of a community manager. So I'm a community builder online, built several online communities, and you know, I use social sciences to underpin the work that I do to build effective communities, and the concepts that I use help to motivate participation to build bigger and better and more active communities. And as a community manager, we read all the messages that are shared online. And my colleagues at Cancer Chat Canada will know this. We see anecdotally a lot of trends that happen, a lot of support that happens, a lot of changed behavior. And seeing all of this kind of interaction online in a social environment, it's just a very welcoming partnership to work with research so that we can actually have the evidence of the trends that happen, can leverage those communities for all of the phases, really, of research. And that's the way that Jackie and I have structured today's presentation. We want to look at all the phases of research and where and if and the challenges of integrating social media into those sections. So I hope not only to impart some information, but also to maybe get some feedback from you as where we as community managers can help researchers and do the best that we can in cancer survivorship. I think it's a really rich area where the two can meet. So just to give a rough overview of the agenda for today is, first we'll start with what is social media and who's using it and how. And I'm going to assume that most people have a base understanding of social media that is fairly low. And if it's too primary, then we can raise the bar quite easily. But I'm going to assume that there's people have had little experience using social media, at least professionally. We'll then take a bit of an overview of those social media tools, but I really want to then dig deep into where they can be integrated into the research phases. So those first two sections will be short. I hope to generate wild and crazy discussion around ethics and the use of social media. So we'll make sure to leave some time for that. And then I really want to make sure that you walk away with some resources and real practical things that you can do as next steps if this excites you. So what is social media? I just have a very simple definition up here, but it is the use of technology, obviously, combined with social interaction, and I've highlighted collaborate, share, and or collaborate, create, and share, and I'd also add to learn. This is some data of just how Canadians are using or interacting online, and I'd love to invite Jackie to
Sure, and I can jump in here. So this is Jackie speaking. Also wanted to say, just before I launch into describing this, that really have enjoyed the opportunity to be working with Colleen. Colleen is essentially tried, true, and tested practitioner, and so it's been a wonderful opportunity to collaborate in that sense. So this is an infographic that's describing basically use patterns in Canada, and it's just essentially a reminder that Internet penetration is pretty widespread here in Canada. This data is a little bit old, suggesting that 80% of Canadians are online. It's drawing from StatsCan data, and that survey has actually been redone, and the current data actually indicates that 83% of Canadians are online, but specifically this is saying that 80% of Canadians are using the Internet for personal purposes, so it's not actually including professional purposes. So the percentage of people that are actually using the Internet is actually a lot higher, so this is personal use. And then in this infographic, it gives you a little bit more information on the type of activities people are doing online, or the type of software they might be using. And so a lot of people are actually using videos, more so than last year. We have about 64% of people, so again, this is from 2010 data, have a profile on a social network site. About 93% of people are using the Internet to get information about products, to make some decisions about what to buy. And interestingly, at this point, about 25%, if asked, would you give up your TV or your smartphone, would prefer to give up their TV. So we are moving into more sort of ubiquitous computing stage with respect to technology, where people are really connected to the Internet through mobile devices, which often are on hand. And also wanted to just give you a bit of insight on what we've learned about who's using social media, or more specifically online communities or discussion forums for health purposes. So I've conducted a series of studies in a number of different cancer populations here at the Princess Margaret, and one associated with a national cancer support agency. And Colleen, if you just click through some of these, you can just click through all of them. So essentially what we're seeing is that about 25% of cancer patients seem to be using online communities as a source of health information support during the course of their journey with cancer. So really got a range in terms of that breast cancer survivor group, predominantly depending on age. About 26% of testicular cancer survivors, similar percentage of thyroid cancer survivors. And these were cross-sectional surveys conducted using follow-up samples of cancer patients follow-up care at Princess Margaret. And how that compares to the general population. So the Pew Internet American Life Project, if anyone is actually looking for use trends on Internet or other technology use, there's an agency in the U.S. called the Pew Internet and American Life Project, and they routinely conduct random digit dial telephone surveys. And on a range of different trending topics. And they actually publish their data immediately, so they don't use the typical sort of peer-reviewed publication system, and it's openly available for everyone to use, so it's a great resource. So one of their most recent surveys of the American public found that about 25% of American adults are using online communities as a source of health information and support. So in sum, really, we're looking at about 25% of the population right now.
So I'm just going to go through these slides a little bit quickly, but I just wanted to bring in some testimonials of different people who are online and how they use it. And so this is a PhD candidate from New Zealand. These were all shared with me via Twitter. So I just put out to my Twitter network, so how do you use social media? And these are just some of the answers that I got back. So crowdsourced answer for you right here. So mostly to learn. Is how Prajesh uses it. Here, pharmacist here in Toronto, colleague uses it to keep up to date.
And specifically, if I can go back to that, not only up to date in general, but these researchers are describing using social media to keep up to date on recent publications, recent projects, recent activities. So they're describing using social media for professional purposes, not generally to keep up to date.
And in general, people are saying it's faster than you know, any RSS feed or subscription.
I often learn about new funding opportunities through Twitter first. Than some of my other networks.
Yeah. This is a very well-known medical futurist and social media advocate, teaches in program to physicians and how to use social media, and in Hungary, and he uses it all the time to collaborate. So he's a fantastic collaborator. Also, for influence, I'm sure that you've heard of Günter Eisenbach and his use of social media for influence. I don't know if you want to add to that.
We're going to talk a little bit more about this later, but he's published a paper on basically how Twitter is a means to extend the impact of your research publications, and has done an analysis of tweets of research publications and found that that's another way to essentially extend that reach.
And of course, you're probably familiar with Dr. Mike Evans' videos, and he's using social media quite effectively to inform and to educate and to change behavior. So it's a good example of knowledge to action. So I've just pulled out a few tools here, and I don't want to take up too much time, because if a billion users can figure out how to use them, I'm sure we can too, as far as the mechanics of them. But they all have different functionality, and I've tried to put them into where and when you would use which tool for what aspect of research. So the forums I'm referring to as online communities that are governed by a proprietary platform, such as Cancer Connection, Cancer Chat Canada, Virtual Hospice. They all have discussion forums within their interface of their offerings of support and information. Then the more public sites that we're familiar with, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, all have different functionalities of social networking, that you can have personal profiles, but you can also belong to groups. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Blogging can be either a sole author or a group of authors. Google Plus is similar to Facebook, but they have some additional functionality with video conferencing. Mendeley is just one example. There are several out there of ways to collaborate. Google Docs would be another one. We'll talk about collaborative writing and wikis. And then Storify is a curation tool whereby you can take what has been published on these various social networks, Twitter in particular, and write a story using tweets and posts. YouTube and Instagram are just examples. There are several others of video sharing and picture sharing networks. And SlideShare, I hope you all know about as well, where you can publicly post your presentations, your slides. We'll talk. I just want to bring in a conversation about hashtags in here, because they too are becoming more and more popular amongst a variety of different social networks. They started with Twitter because Twitter wasn't a very good organizer. You could follow people and have a stream whereby you dictated who was in that stream, but hashtags are the number sign, just as you can see in the title here, the number sign in front of a letter that was helping to aggregate all tweets around that particular term. And so even if you weren't following the people, if there was a hashtag in front of cancer and you used that as a search term, so the number sign in cancer, you could see everything that was being tweeted about cancer. And so people started to make up hashtags that would build community. And this is what that HCSMCA is, Healthcare Social Media Canada. And that has burgeoned into a chat. So there's a designated time once a week at 1 o'clock Eastern time, so 10 a.m. in Pacific time and 2 p.m. in Atlantic Canada, whereby people can come together and talk about a specific topic. So we'll talk a little bit more about that, but I know that for many people, introductions to social media, the aha moment comes through hashtags. It kind of clears out the noise, if you will. And one hashtag that might be of great interest to you is KMB, so it's knowledge mobilization. So a lot of people who are working in KT use hashtag KMB to share information, and they too have a regular chat. It's once a month, Thursdays at noon in Eastern Canada or Eastern Standard Time, Daylight Savings Time now.
And just to give you another analogy, hashtags are essentially very similar to the notion of keywords or subject headings. So there are actually groups that are starting to organize a whole index of different hashtags. They could also be you could draw similarities to metadata as well.
So we'll be getting into this a little bit more in some of the examples as well. So first, I just wanted to put in this slide just because I thought it might be overwhelming if you've never done social media, but I'm not here to tell you that you all should be on social media. What I'm telling you is that you should be aware of where social media could help you in your work and where you may want to put it in as a line item when you're putting in your grant proposals, and make sure that you have someone on your team that could do it for you, where you could maybe have an affiliation, partnerships with organizations that could do some of the social media on your behalf or in partnership with you if there's a crossover in mandate. So just some things to think about. But I'm not saying you all need to be on all these networks and start tweeting and Facebooking. That's not the message that we're trying to send. So just a quick review of the research phases, mostly just to let you know that I looked them up. But I know that you're very familiar with them, and so we're going to just assume that integrated KT is at all of these stages the way that we're looking at them, not only end of grant KT. Did you want to add anything?
Yeah, no, just that this was a tool that we're using to frame a discussion about different ways social media can be used at different stages of the research process, and we plan to provide some examples of how we've done it and how other people have done it at these different phases.
So often we come with a question already and then start to engage social media. And there are a few examples where people have actually used social media in order to determine the actual research question. And I would encourage you to look for opportunities to be able to do that, to engage communities that are already out there to help determine what the actual question might be that would help suit their needs, and then we could have more effective knowledge to action, perhaps. One of the examples that I could give a little bit with Healthcare Social Media Canada is Healthy Debate. I don't know if you're familiar with Healthy Debate in the other parts of the country, but here in Ontario, Healthy Debate is a social network that does a lot of content creation and wanted to engage people through commenting on their site. And they were getting a lot of participants in creating the content, but not so much engagement. And so they came to Healthcare Social Media Canada and asked us what they could do to improve that engagement, and thereby came out with some research questions that they could now use with more engagement, what worked and what didn't work, and can analyze their community, which I understand they're doing. Is there something that you wanted to add to this one?
No, I thought that was a great example. I was present on that tweet chat and found that researchers and other team members were quite engaged in actually trying to turn this into a research question, not the immediate interest was to find a practical way to engage more people to use this resource, Healthy Debate resource. But it became clear that a lot of people were also quite interested in this as a research question. There was a lot of research questions that evolved through this discussion.
So in study design is where you could use more of the collaborative tools, and there's a great example for this. You can do it with, I'm sure that you're already looking and using various collaborative tools, and I just would encourage you to use more of the social media tools that are out there, or that we include those under the auspices of social media. And this is a paper that was just released, I think, last month or a couple of weeks ago by Patrick Archambault and Tom Vandeveld and a whole host of other authors. about wikis and collaborative writing applications in healthcare, and so I would encourage you to read that. They had over 120 references in this scoping review, one of which is Jackie, so I don't know.
Yeah, I did a study on the use of a wiki as a collaborative authoring tool as a means to try to keep systematic reviews up to date. It was a really interesting case study that we did, and essentially found in that particular case study the wiki to be ineffective in engaging people to assist in updating the systematic review. But found a lot of other interesting findings related to that. And so what Patrick's done here is essentially done a scoping and synthesis of a lot of these types of studies that have looked at using wikis as a means to collaboratively support and engage shared writing activities.
So are there any questions so far? I don't mind if questions come in between. Julian, there's none from outer space?
It's not outer space.
We're not being that inclusive.
And actually, while we're on the topic, Patrick's going to be leading a tweet chat as part of HCSMCA in December on this topic. So if you're interested in learning more about wikis as a collaborative tool, we can give you more information about that later.
So recruitment, I think we can probably spend a little bit more time on recruitment and social media, and so this is where I'm thinking you can partner with your organization, or you can establish some social media presence yourself in order to do recruitment. One of the advantages to partnering with an existing social media presence is that you don't have to build the community. So you want to partner with a community or a social media presence that is going after the audience that you would like to recruit. But there are examples where people have also just started a research study and started social media presence for that study alone. There's a great paper. It's called Can I Retweet Please? Health Research Recruitment and the Twitter Sphere. It was written by Anita O'Connor and colleagues in the Journal of Advanced Nursing, and I encourage you to read it. It's really quite helpful, and did you want to elaborate on that?
Sure. What I really like about this particular article is that they articulated their strategy to use multiple aspects and features on Twitter to recruit. So they started by coming up with a series of tweets to essentially start promoting the study. But then they explicitly, and they wrote this into their IB protocol, asked the community to retweet those tweets. So essentially extend those notifications out into their community. But they weren't passive, so they didn't stop at that. So they made a real effort, the lead researcher made a real effort to respond to questions about the study. So if someone responded to this is very interesting, this is what I understand it to be, should I send it to this group? She would respond and have either a direct message conversation or, if relevant, turn that into an open sort of broadcasting tweet conversation that she would share with her followers. And it was found to be quite effective. In total, over 11 weeks, there were about 700 tweets posted by the researcher, and a lot of that was the conversations that she was having with people that were spreading that message even further. And it resulted in 299 people completing a survey in the course of those 11 weeks, which is a great response rate for a social media study.
Well, their aim was 100. They got almost 3 times.
Yeah. Yeah. So great methods if you're looking for different strategies, and she's described them really well, and also took the opportunity to provide more educational learning opportunities about Twitter. So it's a really nice learning piece.
It's a nice article. I'd like to use the example that we've done with Cheryl Pritloff and Jennifer Jones here at Elixir. So Elixir just recently established their social media presences, and in May, and we're growing, and we're wanting to also put out our personality as embracing research, that we use community for research, that we work with the community and provide interventions based on solid research as well. And so we were able to get approval from RAB to help with recruitment for Cheryl's study. And so what we did is we wrote a blog. Now, I had told Cheryl our community's burgeoning. It's very, very small at this time because we posted this early September, so we'd only been online for a few months. I said, I don't believe that we're going to have a huge success rate in bringing in people for recruitment, but what you're going to help us do is actually build a community who will thereby know we do research, and you're going to set the stage for more success in future research that we'll do here at Elixir. So it's a bit of a give and take, but this was an amendment to Cheryl's protocol already, so it wasn't that you were trying to use this, Cheryl, as your only source of recruitment, right? It was an add-on. And so she first wrote a blog in plain language about what the study was for. And in particular, we were trying to reach the people that had only been here once and maybe didn't come back, because we wanted to know what the barriers were to not coming back. It was much easier for us to reach people who continually return to Elixir. And then we used Facebook and Twitter to extend that message, and we interact with people who are asking us questions like they did in the study that we were just talking about before. I don't know if you wanted to add anything, Cheryl. I'm kind of putting you on the spot. I didn't even tell you that you were going to be on the screen, but...
I don't.
You don't? Okay. Did I cover it off? All right, then. So we're encouraging more of this type of interaction with our research team here at Elixir. And
one thing to add about this point is that the research ethics boards not all of them are ready for these sorts of requests. So this was an example of a study that has been approved. Since then, the research ethics boards, certainly at the UHN, has raised concern about using social media for research. So we're engaging in several conversations with them to review this and to explore different ways to address their concerns and enable us using social media for research to be able to continue doing that. And we can talk a little bit more about that in the ethics section. So this is a quick example I'll give you. To get more information about this particular example, go to the Mayo Clinic. All of this sort of centers around activities at the Mayo Clinic. So in essence, this is an example demonstrating how patients can basically help mobilize samples to participate in research. So this all started with a woman by the name of Catherine Leon. She, 38, was having a lot of cardiac problems suddenly and learned that she had a condition called spontaneous coronary artery disease, which can come on quite suddenly and can be terminal. She started doing some research to see if there was anything available for her, found that there's not a lot of treatments available, or not a lot of information about treatments available. Stumbled upon an online community for women's heart health and found a number of other women in that community who had the same condition with the same concerns, that they were having trouble finding relevant opportunities for treatment. She then learned about a study, or rather a conference that was happening at the Mayo Clinic about women's heart health. So she went to the Mayo Clinic, where she met lead researcher, Dr. Hayes, can't remember Dr. Hayes' first name, who worked specifically in the area of SCAD research, was having a lot of difficulty actually running studies because she couldn't recruit enough participants, because this is a relatively rare condition. And so Catherine Leon said to her, oh, that's no problem, I can help you get participants. So she went back to her online community, got a whole bunch of participants, sufficient enough to run some pilot studies. Those pilot studies have then led to some randomized controlled trials that Dr. Hayes is running. So it really created a very wide and vibrant and variable patient population that she's now using to further her research in this area.
And I'd just like to underline how empowering that is to a community, how community managers would love you for this. Because this is a real bonding moment for a community, that they can pay it forward, that they can advance research is huge, and it deepens the sense of community, and that is a part that is often elusive to a community manager, is to deepen that. And when you have a community that can create something, then you have a community that will go through thick and thin with one another. So it's really a win-win situation for both research and for the community. So I'd like to just move through with data collection. So data collection is something that is also really, social media can really propel data collection. You can study social media posts that are already there without any engagement of the actual members or the authors of those posts. But you can also engage the members of communities. And there again, there's a partnership with the community manager that you can help them because they have that relationship, know the social sciences of motivation to participation. And if you work in partnership with them, you can probably get better results. I'd love to just go to the examples, I think, right, Jackie?
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is another quick one I can give you an example of. So I conducted a content analysis of breast cancer groups on Facebook. I first did a search using the internal Facebook search engine to find all these groups. And there was, at that time, this was 2008, over 600 groups dedicated to breast cancer on Facebook. And then I did a content analysis of all the content in these groups. At that point, I was really interested in understanding how people use Facebook groups for support, and found, just to conclude this, I found essentially that they were using these groups more for fundraising and awareness-raising purposes, and much less so for emotional or informational support. And I'm finding that in other breast cancer samples that Facebook doesn't tend to be the preferred medium for that sort of mutual informational supportive care support for the breast cancer, for people with breast cancer.
So this slide I put in there just because I thought it was time we had some color, and also so that I could brag a little bit. And we don't need to dwell on this one, but this was the social network analysis that was done of Healthcare Social Media Canada. So it's a little bit of a feather in my cap. It's that bonding moment. The community was just really proud that they were able to show that we have a really wide dispersed community with quite a number of contributors from all sectors in the healthcare, and that we have no focal point in that it's not, the knowledge is not housed with one or few people, that we're really networking throughout our social network. And this was a study that was done by some premier social science researchers, Carolyn Hathorn-Thwaite in BC, and Anatoly Gruzund in, I'm not sure if I'm saying his name correctly, but he's out in Halifax. So it's just another way that community and researchers can work together.
And the other key finding of this particular social network analysis study of HCSMCA was that they found that people were interacting with each other regardless of their role or their background. So they didn't find researchers talking to researchers, clinicians talking to clinicians, and practitioners talking to practitioners. The interactions were really well distributed across everyone despite background. So really demonstrated a really sort of embedded and engaged social network.
And if I can brag just a wee bit, that was by design. I mean, that was orchestrated. That was my intent. That's work that I started to be on the ground before going online, to make sure that it was a community of practice really across all sectors. I wanted patient representation, provider representation, researchers, policymakers. Been more successful in some areas than others, and that the ownership of the community be an equalizer as well.
So this is another great example, also an opportunity to tell you about Patients Like Me if you haven't heard about it. So Patients Like Me is a different sort of online community that's really all based on data. So people are asked when they register to complete a pretty extensive set of questions to set up their profile, and then a number of different online communities form depending on the patient's sort of core interest or core condition. But specifically, I'm bringing this up, you can just click to there's another slide on top of that.
Yeah.
So the Patients Like Me community has their own research team, and you can collaborate with their research team as well. And they are really interested in using Patients Like Me to accelerate knowledge discovery. So this is an example of a study that was started by a group of ALS patients in the ALS subcommunity of Patients Like Me. They started experimenting with lithium carbonate to slow the progression of ALS. There was some skepticism about whether or not this was going to be effective in the research circles. And so over a period of 12 months, they created their own online spreadsheet to record this data. Patients like me then built in an algorithm to support this data collection. And at the end of this observational study, they found that lithium wasn't slowing their disease progression. So this observational study has then led to a number of other studies involving some more rigorous methods, such as randomized controlled trials, to review the supposed effect of lithium on disease progression for ALS.
So data analysis, again, you can, I think we'll illustrate this best through the examples.
So this is an example of a study led by Dr. Holly Witteman at the University of Laval, and I'm collaborating with Holly on this study. So what we're trying to do with this study is really engage the community to help us answer these questions. So it's a study that aims to find out what people with diabetes want healthcare professionals to know about the management of diabetes. So we're sort of reaching out using social media to ask people to basically nominate or find or create new posts, threads, content that they feel is representative of what they would like healthcare professionals to know about diabetes management. And then we're going to go back to them and actually ask them to prioritize that. So we get their view, their sort of initial, so they essentially would take that sort of first crack at that analysis, that sort of interpretation of that, and bring that to that next level of interpretation.
And Holly's an integral member of the Twitter community or Twitter chat, DSMA, so Diabetes Social Media America. I'm not sure what the A stands for, but she's reached out to some key influencers who are then retweeting and helping.
Absolutely. And on this project team, actually, so it's Holly, Patrick, myself, and a number of moderators.
Yeah, there they are, yeah.
And a number of notable individuals with diabetes who have their own blogs, as well as moderators and facilitators of social media. So we really had a really practitioner-oriented project team to move this forward.
This is another example that neither of us are participating in, but are fascinated by. So citizen scientists, the Cancer Research UK is actually mobilizing the public to help them identify cancer in cell sliders. So they get a tutorial and go through slides and help identify some of the anomalies in the slides. Each slide will be analyzed by several people, and I don't even know how big that number is. Does it start with 1,875,120 images have already been looked at, and it just opened up a couple of months ago. They've used this type of citizen science, anyway, that word, for astronomy as well, just discovering different stars and galaxies, and it's been quite successful. So I'm really quite thrilled to see this example being used in the Cancer Forum. I've got the link there, clicktocure.net, if you want to look at it. And it's also done in plain language, and the usability is great, so it's very exciting. End of grant KT. I mean, we could give a gazillion examples here, but I'm sure that some of you are familiar with some of the opportunities here. Again, it's partnering with an organization to help with dissemination, finding some of your knowledge brokers. That's really important on social media. So if you don't know who they are on social media, find someone who does. I mean, I'm sure we all have our networks, and some of them are going to be on social media. Healthcare Social Media Canada is a fantastic place to start. And I would go with well, let's go into the examples. Why did I put him in here? I put it in the wrong place, didn't I?
For the end of grant KT?
Yeah. So I did put this, I'm sorry, but this is, we already referred to this study, but one of the end of grant KT exercises that he's doing that Jackie already alluded to is that Patrick and Tom are going to be joining HCSMCA on December 4th. and they're going to be discussing, moderating and discussing this study in particular. So HCSMCA loves to disseminate research, we love to problem solve, and we love to be of use. So use that community in that way. That was the only example. We have more examples than that.
We did have more examples.
Where did
they
they go?
But another thing to add on here, so the Gunther's work with
yes.
the tweet twin pack,
yes.
what do you call it?
That's what I was trying to show here. That's why the lines.
An example of that.
Yeah.
So he's done an analysis on the effect of tweets on expanding the reach and impact of journal publications. And in his particular journal, so he runs the Journal of Medical Internet Research, he also shares this information. So research articles that are getting the most tweets are prioritized at the top of that page for a period of time. But he's done an analysis on the usefulness of tweets and the twin pack factor as he describes it. So in terms of the practical takeaway from this, when you're thinking about publishing your work, to not stop at that journal or that conference presentation, to actually engage your internal project team or your program to support you in spreading that word through social media, and then that will actually have a sort of amplifying effect on, and a lot of university institutions are actually starting to re-look at their ways of evaluating impact on research and starting to consider social media and the internet in other sort of dissemination efforts.
Yeah,
a lot
so
of people that are trying to push for that.
He was looking at articles published between 2008 and 2011, and he found that those that were tweeted about, so if they got a lot of attention on Twitter, that they were found to be 11 times more likely to be highly cited. Application of knowledge. So there's a number of different ways that that we can bring this knowledge then to a practice, and that's where I think that you can use the power of peer influence through social networks. And I'd like to give an example. I had a brilliant example now. They're all escaping
right
me.
Now,
but yeah,
St. Mike's example.
Well, there's the Dr. Mike Evans' work on video, but I'm also thinking if I were to imagine what we could do in cancer survivorship, if you've already engaged a community, you find out through your study about the benefits of the preventative measures that you can do for lymphedema. I'm just sort of grasping at straws here, but if you then bring that back to the community, your knowledge brokers or your earlier doctors of this type of research, and then they influence the other members of that community to take these similar measures, then you're going to have used that social media community to bring that knowledge to action.
Sort of sustainability and scalability effects. So if you start thinking about integrated K to the beginning and start engaging those people and grow that community, but by the time you've got some knowledge to share, maybe you want to then develop an intervention based on the knowledge that you've shared. You've now got this larger community that you can go out to and engage and actually start implementing or applying your research. So it's another sort of lens at looking at the value of that sort of integrated KT approach.
And then they can come back and feed you information of how to best disseminate it, how it's going to resonate with them to adopt that intervention, right? Mm-hmm. Where are we? Have we got time for some ethics?
Yeah. So we may not have time to have a discussion. We've, Colleen and I have presented give a guest lecture on social media and online communities and research for a class at the University of Toronto last week. Giving a similar one at York next week. We find that these parts get really, people get really involved and engaged because there's a lot of really interesting ethical questions. So unfortunately, we don't have the great setting to have those sorts of discussions, but we at least want to leave you with some questions that we've certainly been asked when we go to the Research Ethics Board with studies like these, just to keep in mind. So typical example, if you were to submit a protocol to Research Ethics Board to conduct a content analysis of Facebook groups. So the assumption here is that these groups are public. public, in as much as Facebook is public. And so, Colleen, if you could just click forward. Both of them are fine. So the two questions that I routinely get when I submit content analyses like this are the users aware of the public nature of their groups and the public nature of the postings within their groups? And this really speaks to the public-private debate that's garnered a lot of attention in research and literature review spaces. So generally, if you were to make a comparison between an online group versus an online square, if you were to submit a Research Ethics Board protocol to do an observational study of Yonge Dundas Square in Toronto, for example, they would probably say, no problem, that's not of our purview, go ahead. But if you were to do something similar and propose that that online group was the same as this public square, the boundaries of that public-private distinction are less clear. And whether or not people actually consider themselves to be research subjects or consider other people maybe watching or studying them is unclear. So you'll have to be prepared to answer these sorts of questions. And also know your platform very well. They'll ask you to go back, or they'll ask you to describe the privacy and security implications and settings and strategies that the platform has created, how often they change, whether or not they inform the users of these changes. The other thing that they'll ask you is how you're going to go about negotiating consent. So if they feel that consent is required in the context of the social media, the tools that you're using, how would you go about negotiating that consent? And the other example that we wanted to give was of inadvertent disclosure, and this is coming up in the feedback that we're getting from the Research Ethics Board now. So I was mentioning that Cheryl's study was approved by the UHN Research Ethics Board. Now they've put a halt on these sorts of studies as they're reviewing their process, because they're quite concerned about the inadvertent sharing of potentially personally identifying information. They've been very open to learning more about this, and so we've had a number of communications with them and written a number of different responses to various questions they've had, and actually sat down, had a good 2-hour session with some of the directors and members of the Research Ethics Board, and they're quite open to reviewing these policies. So if you just flip to the questions. So essentially, one of the main concerns they have is how do you protect individuals from inadvertently sharing potentially identifying information on these sites, and who's responsible for that? So questions to keep in mind that you may be asked to respond to. And then I'm just so cognizant of the time. We've probably only got about 8 minutes left or something. We need time for questions. What I'd love to do is, Colleen, if you're okay, is to open it up. We've got a number of resources that are on the remaining slides that you could use to learn more about social media and get involved. But would love to open things up to questions.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So maybe what we can do is, just so that everybody gets a chance to ask questions, is just sort of go through the different sites. So maybe we'll start in Vancouver, and if any of the groups that are joining us from Vancouver have questions, we could start with you.